it was fun. In fact, that day I had that podcast in the morning that I was recording, and then later in the day I was recording a different podcast called the Retail Perch that was all about the use of voice technologies in retail. And it was really interesting because I did a little demo of Parrot Studio, and we also had a chance to talk about sort of how this could be used in retail. And it's one of these areas where I think that we haven't really thought about voice in much more than just a canned way. So that was really fun too.
Yeah, I've been listening to a number of different podcasts over the last few days, and I think voice in retail usually seems to start with like a kiosk model. So if you don't have enough salespeople, you could have a kiosk. I think there's probably a lot more of like ways of curating the shopping experience, kind of like a museum maybe, where you get a voice agent and then you can like navigate around the store. I mean, search would be the easiest like valuable start, I imagine, like where is X?
Yeah,
But
yeah. But we were talking about, you might find this really interesting. We were talking about the idea of, overhead messaging, right, in stores.
Mhm.
Right now, it's very, functional. Keep out of this aisle, or this is in that aisle, or this is, whatever. It's more like directional, informational. But you can imagine that being a lot more interesting. Like many of us go to the grocery store like right before you're gonna make dinner, right? Or like when you're hungry, right? So wouldn't it be great to like be, guided through, find the ingredients to your recipe, or just like a lot more about pushing people to like options that they don't typically do, that they don't typically go for. I just think that there's opportunities here that are kind of a lot more interesting. I was just kind of almost imagining it like almost like a cooking show app or something. Rachel Ray is guiding you through the grocery store and getting these ingredients, and then you can, when you get home, there's an experience where you can then cook with whoever it is that you're cooking with.
It feels like the use cases where this would be great are when people want a deeper relationship with the store, the experience, the brand, things like that. And that could be a grocery store. I think sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. I'm also thinking about things like a health or fitness store where there may be some digging into like, what are you looking for? Same thing with recipes at a grocery store. I keep coming back to the relationship with the user as being what drives the value of these conversational interfaces, especially with voice. It's like, so this came up on the Sonic Multicast, the Witlingo podcast, which was, oh wait, now I'm gonna blank. Oh yeah, somebody made the recommendation of don't just create a voice version of an existing product or flow. If you're just trying to create a voice version, like say you have, the classic would be like FAQs, and then you turn them into voice, and now you have voice FAQs. And that can be useful, but it's not as creative, or it's not as, there's so many opportunities that are left on the table for voice specific things.
Exactly.
So I can imagine the same thing with all these shopping experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you just take the FAQs and turn them into voice, it's sort of like the lowest lift.
Yeah.
But it may not actually even work because that's not how we talk to each other. It's also not how, it's not the kinds of things that you'd explore. I mean, that's much more written content to be consumed in a different way. But I think in terms of like, what are the questions you'd actually ask if someone was in front of you? Mm-hmm. You'd ask them in a different way, you'd answer in a different way. And I think that's really important to think about what is the user interaction. And I think that's something that right now people aren't really exploring in a way that feels as natural. So just turning it into voice, isn't enough, right?
It's fun though. It's exciting to think about all those possibilities. I mean, I know we're sort of just putting a pin in like, hey, there's a fun space here. Now I want to like go do a 2-hour workshop, like brainstorming and organizing and everything. Voice in retail feels like there's a lot of opportunity.
I think that I think it's a really overlooked area, and I think the solutions that retailers are looking for they're sort of just scratching the surface of what can be possible. It's like you wouldn't want to read aloud the entire inventory of your grocery store, right? That's not the point. But like, how do you do things like going back to language, right? Like, how do you categorize? How do you what's the ontology, right? What's someone looking for? How do you get into rather than the perspective of what do you want to push to the user, thinking about what the user might want in that space, right? That's actually, I think, one of the things where user research could come in so handy, where you create experiences that are like a pull kind of experience rather than a push.
I mean, it shows that, and this was another claim on the Witlingo podcast, that it's not just the design of the conversation, it's a lot of the background research on what's the use case, what's the value, what's the knowledge graph or like information structure that we have to have for this to be an actual useful interaction.
Right.
And that was put forward as like the next threshold for this stuff is like, well, we need to figure out where the great use cases. I mean, and people are working on this, but it's not just designing really great dialogue or having a slightly, I don't know, more empathetic character or something. It's like, thinking about the retail experience and really knowing what people are doing in that context, what they would like.
Yeah, and keeping it interesting. So one of the things I was talking about is that over the summer, I recognized that when I was going to my local grocery store, the messages that were being played overhead around the COVID, we go in, there's certain aisles were only in one direction during the height of COVID and so on. And those messages were constantly being played overhead, right? You're in the store and that's all you hear is like noise pollution. And after a while, people stopped listening to them. At the beginning, people were listening to them, and you sort of catch yourself in the wrong aisle and then go look on the floor and go, oh, this is I'm going the wrong way in one way. Yeah. But then after a while, it became sort of like, oh, it's just so annoying, and people stopped listening to it. So if that was actually kept fresh, right? Think about that content being, oops, you're in the wrong aisle, or, did you know that odd numbered aisles are this or whatever? So I think that there's this lack of freshness, and it's kind of ironical, right? That in grocery store it's not fresh.
I doff my hat.